Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our first LinkedIn Live event of 2024. I'm Aaron Shilts, CEO at NetSPI. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Doing good. Glad to be
Ready
here.
to go?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we're going to cover a variety of topics on these LinkedIn Lives. We're going to do more of them in the coming year. Probably just a range of topics, from bringing in some of our technical thought leaders and experts and pretty technical topics, as well as topics like this that I'm actually qualified to talk through, and just getting to know our team better and chatting with different team members. So today, again, I'm chatting with a member of our executive team, Tim MalcomVetter. Tim and I were fortunate enough to first work together 10 years ago, and he's just got a fascinating journey from practitioner through to the executive ranks. We're just thrilled to have him on the NetSPI team as of 2023, working with our customers and doing a lot with the team, NetSPI, and with our clients. So Tim's title is EVP of Strategy. So that sounds a little bit to me like VP of Special Projects. Tim, tell me a little bit, man, about your role and kind of what you're focused on in the coming year and what you're passionate about.
Thanks. That is kind of the joke, right? That's our internal joke anyway. So I've got the labs team. So the labs team that NetSPI is famous for, which is for all the cool tools out and the talks and the things you've seen at conferences. A lot, there's that whole group, that pedigree, the Dark Side Ops group that came from our acquisition of Silent Break. That's all part of that. And big chunk of what I get to do is just be disruptive and think, like, how can we shake things up? Pen tests shouldn't be the same way that they've been for the last 20 years. How can we make them bigger and better? And so there's a lot there, and continuous testing and trying to bring some of the stuff that we see from the really, really large, really well-funded security programs and bring it to the enterprises that maybe can't do it, and even down market to smaller companies that absolutely don't even know how to start. So that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm looking forward to, and why I'm here with NetSPI.
Yeah. And, I think your journey from, again, kind of practitioner to the executive ranks is an interesting one, especially maybe for people that are earlier in their career, maybe trying to determine, their career path, whether they stay on more of a technical track or more leadership. But man, tell me about the journey that led you here and what gets you excited about, the path you've taken.
Yeah. Well, actually, once upon a time, many, many years ago, when I was starting out my career, I used to listen before podcasts. I used to take a little, I had an iPod Nano with a little auxiliary analog cable. I plugged into my dash, and we didn't have podcasts, but I had downloaded MP3s of certain talks, and I'd listen to the same talks over and over again. And there's a handful of them. And there's one guy who was one of the first CISOs ever, and he worked for AT&T, Bell Labs, and that sort of thing. And one of his advice when he was asked this question, he was obviously CISO at that time, right? He said, stay as technical as you can for as long as you can. And I was like, oh, okay. So I decided at that moment, I'm going to stay as technical as I can, individual contributor roles for as long as I can. And ultimately, I switched over. I took a brief stint where I was leading a dev team when I stepped away from cyber for like a whopping year and a half. And I said, I'm just going to ship features and code, do e-commerce, and do that, which I was really glad I did that. It was a great experience and reshaped some of the things, the way I think about how to help enterprises actually secure their software. But after that, like I was back, I'm like, I'm going to be this consultant. I'm going to be as technical as I can. And then one day, an opportunity to go build a red team program at the world's largest company fell in my lap. And I knew I wanted to lead it because I just wanted to make sure the team was the way I wanted it to be. Like, ultimately, the reason why I like leading is I wanted the team to be the team I wanted to be on. And that's the only way to really ensure that was if you're actually leading the team. And then I just kind of went from there. And then I just really got the bug and really liked it. And with my last role at Sideris, I really loved the just hair on fire, growing a business at breakneck speed, solving all these problems, trying to turn things around and just like grow a business. So it kind of went from like hacker to entrepreneur somewhere along the way there. And that's ultimately how I got here. It is a little weird, I guess, but it makes perfect sense to me. There's not a single experience that I look at, like even my days back in college working at Best Buy, that I use those skills every single day. You're talking to customers. I still talk to customers. I still help people, even when you're not, talking to customers. You're in an enterprise role. You're still selling a project or an idea to somebody, to a stakeholder. So I just bring it along with me.
I mean, you hit on something important too, which is we talk about, building a business and taking care of clients and innovating. It's all about building teams at the end of the day. I mean, if you get that piece right, and I think that's where some of the technical background comes as well, just your ability to evaluate talent and build a world-class team. It's like, man, if you can do that, especially in cyber, where we're all fortunate to work in a space that's got a ton of demand, you build a great team and a lasting team, a lot of the other, and then just focus on taking care of your customers. A lot of the rest takes care of itself ultimately.
When I look at it, it's like I bring the engineer mindset. I've got a problem, I'm going to engineer it. And in this particular case, it's how do you get more capacity out of a team? You have to realize you can't do all the things you want to do by yourself. So if you're really being smart and thinking about it like an engineer would, you're like, okay, I got this person with this skill set I can plug in here. I don't have to do that anymore. They've got it. They can run with it. This person over here can do this. This person over here can do this. And then it just frees you up to start doing bigger and better things at a higher level. So I think I took that. That's kind of how I justified making the jump over on this side, I think, a little bit too.
Yeah. My journey was a little different, where I came to the realization a while ago. It's like I'm working with some brilliant people. This was back in the fishnet security days. I was more technical. I came through the technical ranks as well, but pretty quickly realized, like, man, these team members are a lot better at this than I am. Like, it's taken me 5 times longer to solve some of these technology challenges, whether it was firewalls or IPS or whatever. I'm like, I may want to think about a different track for my life. And, but yeah, different journeys to get there. And, but love that, also share that technical background, which I think just helps me as the leader of the organization and building teams and innovating. But, as we're getting ready for this, we're talking about the first days that we worked together 10 years ago. Long time, but also just like, it's like the days are long, but the years are fast. Like, it just went like that. But when you look back at some of the things that were top of mind 10 years ago, it feels like an eternity ago. So we talked about that a little bit. I mean, things like Heartbleed were top of mind. The shell shock, did they call it a worm at that time? I don't know, whatever. Maybe it was malware, but at that point.
Yeah.
The Sony Pictures hack, FireEye, acquiring Mandiant, which they've seemed like the same company for a long time. BYOD was top of mind. I mean, it was just a much different world and focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And application security was kind of mature by that point. Like it was a thing that stood on its own, but enterprises were still in the early stages of adopting it. Credit cards were still what people were really concerned about. Like ransomware, the first ransomware was 10 years ago, pretty much, right? So it didn't really become a thing and take over like it's taken over now. So when I started red teaming and even pen testing, we were all concerned about credit cards. I was like, probably, especially when you work with different merchants, like that's the number one thing that bothered them, right? You had PCI doing all this stuff. Now, red teams don't even go for that hardly at all. The black market's not even selling them, stolen cards the same way. It used to be you got a lot of value out of them, but now the banks have figured out how to detect fraud, and they've figured out, and the merchants have gotten largely very, very mature, and there's credit card tokenization and scope reduction and all this stuff. We used to do this crazy stuff where we would do. I got talks from like 10 years ago where we would attack credit card tokenization systems using timing analysis, where we'd send a request and see if is it 50 milliseconds or 80 milliseconds to get the response back. And if the difference in time was an indication of whether or not I hit an existing token or not. And it was weird, the things we would do now, and now nobody cares about that. Like, it's just done and gone. It's just in the dust someplace.
Yep. And yet, like, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like, a lot of the same fundamentals. And what do you see as some of the things that, while the world has changed in cyber a lot, like, what are the fundamentals and the things that just haven't, that are just the same?
Access control is access control. It's really weird. I'm actually one of those few red team guys who will actually go break out. Like, I've used Bell LaPadula model in an actual red team debrief before. And that's kind of a weird thing, because you think red team guys don't care about like the academic side. I've got the academic side too. So I care about that kind of thing. But like, if you think about access control, whether it's an on-prem legacy network 10 years ago with Active Directory, or whether it's a mixed cloud on-prem today, or a completely 100% in cloud, brand new, like a SaaS company that's started up and never had to have any of that, you have access controls. The technologies and the features are the same. And so I can talk to somebody about something like when cloud was brand new. I remember I got a junior pen tester, junior red teamer to come work on my team that really understood cloud. He didn't understand anything about on-prem, like not a thing, but he knew cloud. And I taught him how to red team. And then he told me about this cloud thing, and they go, oh, that's like this other thing. That's exactly the same thing. It's just got a new name and it has a new way it works, but functionally it's the same, right? So you've got permissions, you got access, you've got governance, you've got all these processes, and this stuff's never going to change. Just, it's like the nouns and proper nouns might change, but the verbs are the same, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of how I look at it. And so yeah, I think you could pick somebody up that understands that, put them in a time capsule, bring them back a decade later, and they'll take 6 months to get acclimated, but they'll be fine, right? They'll keep
As long as you have the fundamentals. Yeah, exactly. When we first started talking before you came on board last year, this is one of the things I love about bringing new executive team members and just other team members from the outside on board is they, kind of challenge the status quo. And there's a period where, they're not affected by groupthink. They're not affected by the way you're doing it. They have a different perspective. And so we started talking, and Tim asked me, he's like, hey, what's the strategy? What's the focus? Like, what are we doing? I said, well, we're the global leader in offensive security. We're purely focused on offensive. And that's one of the things we're really proud of. I think makes our organization really good and deliver great services, that focus and just doing one thing and doing it really well. But Tim's response was, you were kind of like, you're like, offensive, that just sounds offensive. Like, why do we choose that word? I'm like, well, because that's the word we choose. And it took me a while to wrap my head around it, but we've then challenged ourselves to thinking about, like, if we call ourselves an offensive security partner, is that really a partner? Is that a partner to the defenders of the world? The majority of the people that work in cyber that are focused on defending their organizations, do you really want to be seen as the offenders, as the offensive people? And so we've kind of like tried to flip the script, and we're gonna really change some of the way that we brand and talk about ourselves. And we're thinking a lot about a definition around proactive security. Just everything we do, whether it's our testing or ASM or BAS or other software solutions, just being proactive for our customers. So, how do you define it, Tim? I mean, back to that conversation and how you think of proactive. How does it come through in words for you?
Well, first of all, so I think offensive security is probably a deep joke that probably some red teamer thought, oh, you guys are defensive, so I'll be offensive. Am I offensive or offensive? Like the stress on the syllables matter there. I think it was a joke, and I think the industry took it, and it's just like, I can't believe that the industry is doing it. Now, that said, that culture or that idea that we're going to be offensive, we're going to be brash, is 100% not NetSPI. I haven't seen it anywhere. That's not in the culture, and I think has a lot to do with just the way NetSPI works, how we build and raise talent through NetSPI University. We actually teach that up ourselves. And there's just this culture of, we bring people along here. There's not this culture of, we go hire rock stars that are suddenly just going to be the best you can get, and your quality is different on your engagement because you got the right rock star or whatever. It literally is, nope, we're going to bring everybody along. So first of all, like, the level set, that's not at NetSPI. You don't see that mindset. So that's good. If it wasn't, I'd be really hesitant to come. Unless my task was to go fix that and change it. So secondly, in terms of proactive security, like, it's just taking the same concepts of, like, okay, cool, you did an external pen test, and that was what, a 2-week engagement? What'd you do the other 50 weeks of the year? Yeah. Right? How do you know that you've got somebody with expert level eyes? Well, we do vuln scanning and everything. Okay, great. Well, how do you know? Like, if you've got an external pen tester, one of the things that they're really good at is finding weird stuff. And you might not know. And there might be this moment in time that something popped up and it was there for a week and it went away. And that's the opportunity. That's the thing that caused the breach. So if we can race it, like, everything in cyber is all about finding the bad things faster than the good guys, or the bad guys, can find it, so that the good guys can get ahead of it. And just aligning with that defender's mindset. If you work in a SOC, nobody understands this better than people that work in SOCs, because it doesn't ever turn off. 24/7, you've got something you could be looking at. And, our goal is just to align with that mindset and bring the most important things to the top, so you're not wasting time.
And whether you refer to it as offensive or proactive or whatever, like, what do you think some of the biggest industry kind of misconceptions are in the space that we operate in? For one thing, I'll tell you, as somebody who wasn't familiar with how NetSPI did delivery, and when we first talked about it, it's like, pen testing, man, like, it's good. You look at it, it's really technical. You go break something apart, you understand how it works, and then you ship somebody a 100-page PDF. I'm like, that is so old fashioned. Like, why is pen testing still doing that? And then I got in and I saw, oh, no. NetSPI has already kind of figured a little bit of that out.
We got with our Resolve platform, and we're doubling it down with our new platform that we'll talk about later this year as we bring this together, right? Like we are getting ahead of that. We're not just shipping you a PDF. It is now part of your workflow. We integrate with your Jira for your developers or whatever bug ticketing or tracking system you've got. So like it becomes just a piece and a part of the process where we can bring our expertise in. That to me is already wildly different than there's still a lot of really good security consultants out there that are spending a lot of time and then they're writing a report, and their thought process around like how I'm going to get better or automate or do more is I'm just going to automate building my PDF. They're not thinking more about like the workflow and the integrations and like what's the impact to the customer when they take this in. I've seen it on the other side where that's part of the benefit of being a practitioner on the enterprise side. You get to see, cool, you found all this stuff. Now it's going to go farmed out. That's going to go to like 4 different dev teams because there's different components and it's a really complicated app. And different dev teams have different priorities. And at some point they're going to say, I fixed it. And it's going to be in a non-prod environment. And the security guy who's trying to coordinate and quarterback all this is going to go, hey, NetSPI or whomever, I'm ready for a retest. And you're going to go in there and find out it never actually got deployed. And you're going to be like, that burned my last and only retest. And it's like, how do we get all of that friction and just remove it, and just make it where we understand how you work. And that to me that's one of the ways we can be the most disruptive, is just to take all that friction away and just make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little, we talked about this as well, but and this is something that's been going on forever, but your least favorite cyber buzzwords. By the way, I'm sure we're going to see a bunch of consistent ones at RSA and Black Hat and everything this year, but what are some of your least favorite?
Well, my go-to on this, and this would be a great place for people watching to drop their own comments in here so we can get reminded and kind of, I don't know, shake our heads with you about it. But I still am fascinated by the fact that SIM or SEAM, as some people pronounce it still, like defiantly, by the way, too. The ones that hang on to SEAM are like they're holding on. And I've worked with some of them. They're great people, but how that term even came to be is a weird story. So if you look back at early days where back in my career, when I was naive and young and thought, security is just, we're going to get this recipe right. I'm this expert chef. Here's all the ingredients. I'm going to have this type of protein and this type of starch, and we're going to go mix all this up, and we're going to get this perfect security model right, and it's never going to break. Eventually you realize, well, that's stupid. I realized pretty fast. It was a wake up call for me that you have to then monitor. And if you're going to monitor, you have to throw your stuff in some sort of a place where you can find your logs. And everybody said, okay, we're going to throw it in a SIM. We're going to call it a security event management solution. Another company came along and said, we're going to throw it in our SIM, SIM, security information manager. And then somebody said, hold the phone. Our marketing's better than yours. We're going to be both. We're going to be a security event and information manager, or security information and event manager. Nobody knows. And so I seriously think that if you go to a random SOC today and you find somebody that's less, like say 3 years or less of cyber, working the front lines, defending some big enterprise today, and you say, what does SIM stand for? There's a coin toss chance that they don't even know. And if you ask them, like you ask the most seasoned person in there, where did the name come from? I guarantee they don't know. They don't realize that it's like that. So anyway, that's my go-to. There's a lot of them, but yeah.
Couple of good comments, by the way. So here I have a question on this one. Troubleshooting snort rules. Is it troubleshooting snort rules, or is it troubleshooting snort rules? Like, I'm not quite sure. Maybe we can get a follow up on that one. Single pane of glass. That one is way overused. Trial by fire.
Attack coverage is a really interesting one, because as you get in there, you're like, okay, I've got this coverage for a technique. Well, you really have this coverage for a tactic. And this is one thing, like, I wish that MITRE would actually have not done it the way they did. I tried to lobby them to do it. Now they get these sub techniques. I tried to get them to think TTP all the way down: tactics, techniques, procedures. You have your tactics, that's your columns. You've got your techniques, that's the thing. And what they're calling sub techniques are really procedures. They're really mechanisms for how you do it. And yeah, I've got coverage for a technique, but for one procedure. So is that technique cool? Let's say it's scheduled tasks. Are you looking for SCH tasks.exe / blah, 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 blah? You're doing just a brittle string comparison. If I take SCH tasks out of the system32 directory, I throw it in a temp folder and I call it foo.exe, does it still work? And if it doesn't, well, you're really brittle. And if it still works, like, okay, it's yeah. Then you start playing with where does the detection work? Is it just in the command line, like parsing the strings? Is it looking behaviorally? Where is it at that level? What does coverage mean? And we've seen a lot of, I think the industry is largely laughed at the MITRE Ingenuity reports that come out, and the vendor says, yeah, we got 100% coverage in MITRE Ingenuity, because, well, what does that mean? The vendor had like multiple runs to try to prove that they had observed the event, not even alerted on it, observed it. And you knew in advance what it was. And if you fail to get it, you can go back and tweak something and do it again. Like, that's not coverage. And that's why our breach and attack simulation team, we run these all day long. We know exactly where these various endpoint detection controls actually start to break down and fail, where they're brittle, where they're not. And that changes. It is a constant influx thing. CrowdStrike did really well in this today. SentinelOne did really well in this today. Next week, it's different. Next week, maybe something that they didn't detect last week, they're now able to detect. And so getting down in the weeds, and then there's people playing with nuances around it and constantly tweaking it. So no, 100% MITRE ATT&CK coverage it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. Shifting gears again, and by the way, to the audience, keep us on our toes, keep the questions coming in. But with 8-9 minutes left, top of mind for everyone. And Tim, you're leading our labs and our research organization, so a lot of amazing work being done around AI with our clients. What's your take on Gen AI? Like, thoughts about the rapid adoption? I mean, 23 was a crazy year, and a lot changed in that space.
Yeah, I will say that I was the first person up until about June, July timeframe to say, stop talking about AI. I've even joked that one of the things I've done, really one of the best things I've ever done in my career, is to take certain cyber marketing people and tell them, stop saying AI and ML where it doesn't make sense, right? You can do anomaly detection, you can do k-means clustering, things like that. That's a form of ML, but doesn't mean we need to go slap it on there just to be buzzword about it. There's still... I'm very much maintain that there's still a place for discrete algorithms and human intelligence that will absolutely trump, and you can't take that out. But at the same time, June, July, like everybody, I think, unless you're not paying attention with the ChatGPT 3 branch release and everything else, that changed a lot of things. But it didn't completely, and like now we've got all these organizations rushing to adopt it. And if you're an enterprise almost in any space, if you're not rushing to adopt it, you're taking on too much risk by not adopting it. So I like to go back to like Dan Gear. He's one of those old guys whose MP3s were on my little iPod Nano and my auxiliary cable back in the early 2000s. I listened to his talks all the time, and he talked about there's two kinds of risk, right? Not putting enough risk in play with the business, and not at the same time also having too much, right? Like, you got to find that sweet spot to really grow your business. So you absolutely have to have it in there. But the way I see it going, I bounced this off a bunch of different people inside and outside NetSPI, inside my network. I'm like, am I crazy? This looks to me like you're going to have people building models, and it's going to be very, very deep understanding of the math behind the model and understanding how the model works and how you can potentially do adversarial ML against the model, whether it's a large language model or it's just a traditional ML, like a classifier or something, or unsupervised learning. Like, all of that stuff, very, very deep, very, very technical. There's going to be a subset of enterprises that absolutely have to have them. Almost all of that will be tech companies, with some big enterprises kind of mixed in with little projects that they do. Everybody else, as this becomes normalized and adopted, it's going to meld into what you do for AppSec. It's going to be, I have this web application. I need to do a penetration test. And oh, by the way, you're going to list out the components. I'm using this CDN in front of it. I'm using this WAF. I'm using this development stack. I'm integrating with these types of services. I've got a microservices architecture, or whatever your thing is. Oh, and by the way, I'm integrating with this large language model. And then that's going to bring out a set of abuse cases that need to get tested with that app and everything else. It's going to just merge in. And the pen testers that don't know that are going to get left behind, because they're not going to get proper coverage for their customers. And at the same time, that's a good thing, because it means the big enterprises that are adopting the frameworks, the framework companies, the companies that we work with all the time now, like, we're helping test all the big tech companies, LLMs and all their tech stacks to make sure that's all functional. You get to inherit that, which is, it makes sense, right? It follows kind of like, I kind of joke and say it's somewhere between SQL injection and securing an S3 bucket. So if you remember when SQL injection came out, everybody in the brother was vulnerable because everyone was doing string concatenation on their web apps, and you could go inject random SQL statements into your query, and then it would boom, 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 and bad things would happen. Then what happened? every development framework came out with a mechanism to drop in parameterized queries. So you had a framework that just took care of it for you. Developers don't have to understand it anymore. They just know, I use this framework, check, I'm done. So I think we'll see that happen with the injection side. And then on the equivalent to the S3 bucket, when Amazon S3 service, and same thing with Azure and GCP storage came out, people would start putting things in there and not understand their permissions. And they'd expose content to the world and not understand because it's complicated and it's new. I think you'll have the same kind of a problem with people over indexing and giving too much data into their LLM for building out the model and for what it has access to via API and everything else. So you'll see like a governance aspect there, but it'll be AppSec. I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah. Great question from Steve that was submitted. So Tim, say you're the leader of a threat intel team. What are you thinking about?
Depends on the organization. So most enterprises, in my opinion, over-index and think that they're targeted. That when you start bringing in threat intel, especially when you're nascent, your early stages, immature on it, what you're going to be thinking about is, I need to know all the people that are going to go attack me and my company specifically. The reality is, even if you're targeted, let's say you are one of the Fortune 50 or something, or you are protecting a government asset or something, you do in fact have a set of people that are targeting you, but the majority of the noise is still going to be the ransomware guys that don't care. They don't care. And that's the beautiful thing about ransomware from their perspective, not from our perspective, obviously, is that a ransomware guy doesn't have to know, like they're just running the same playbook and then they go, okay, where did I land? I'm seeing the same fishes out. Okay, the phishing teams they're sending fishes out, they're getting callbacks, they're figuring out what they are, and then they're reselling it to people. Hey, I've got a fish in healthcare, I've got a fish in a merchant, I've got a fish in a manufacturing, and then that access is just going for a different amount. So if you're starting a threat intel company, number one, don't think that you're necessarily highly targeted, and number two, just know that threat intel isn't everything, right? Threat intel is good. But if you start over-indexing on it, what I've seen happen is organizations start looking for indicators of compromise, IOCs, of the threat actors, and not thinking about fundamentals. It's easy to chase the Hollywood when the basics like grade school stuff is right in front of you, and it's not fun. It's not exciting, Yeah. So you got to be very careful about that. You need to have it. It's important to have it, but it's not everything. One of the little joke I like to say to people is the only people that really care about, like CISOs that really care about threat intel, are the ones that are in the middle of the breach. They want to know who's the threat actor that's in here and what are they going to do to me. Outside of that, like, I don't care. I had a CIO that we talked to once who in the middle of a sales pitch, she will remain nameless, but she said, why do I care about Koala Panda 142? And she made up that name. And it sounds legit, right? Koala Panda 142. I laughed so hard and I changed my screensaver background, my marquee, to Koala Panda 142 as a reminder that they don't care, right? Yeah. What they care about is, am I protected? Right? Do you have somebody watching me? Am I good? And then I only care, okay, something bad happened and got past all of these controls. Who is it and what are they after?
Yeah. And absolutely just the focus on hygiene and just the fundamentals that aren't as fun. I mean, just really resonates. All right, as we wrap up, 1 minute left. I got to ask you, man, what are some of the parallels between, operating as an executive, leading a large team, and leading a household with a family of 6? With the footnote that, let's be honest, we know your wife leads the household of 6, but
she absolutely does. She's the boss. Aaron, you're not my boss. She is. So that's
damn right.
Number one. So what ends up happening is I end up using the same kind of conversations. When drama does inevitably happen on either of those scenarios, you with my kids, I can say, did hitting your sister get you closer or farther to your goal of getting ice cream? And I could say, did talking to your coworker that way get you closer or farther to getting your project approved? It's the same thing. So it's kind of funny how sometimes that works. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time, Tim, and for all of you that joined. Again, we're going to do more of these. If there's other follow-up questions, by the way, man, we could do a quick call. Certainly go respond to them via email. That's all we got time for today. Thanks so much for joining, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one soon.
Thank you very much.